Good morning. So I'm a little bit loopy. I just arrived after 23 hours in airplanes this morning at 7:30, so I haven't slept in about a day and a half. So hopefully I'll make sense here. Anyway, so I'm here to talk about the way that we approach experiential learning at Medill and sort of taking our experience, which we have as professionals and teaching in the school at Northwestern University, and how that applies to what we do, and really looking at how we can give students experience, have them connect with professionals in the industry, and then also reflect on that so that the things that they're doing, they can make sense of it and kind of put it in good context for what they do. The Medill School was started in 1921. We're about to have our 100th anniversary, and it's named for Joseph Medill, who was the publisher of the Chicago Tribune, also the mayor of Chicago, the year after the big fire in Chicago. You may have heard about a fire in Chicago in 1871. But it's named after the Medill School. And one of the things I discovered about Medill soon after I arrived there, maybe almost 7 years ago, is that you can't spell Medill without me. And so that would be me there, right? Here's me again. I come from like many of my colleagues, I come from the industry itself. I started off my career right out of graduate school at the University of Texas at Austin. So I actually learned my journalism on the job. I didn't actually study it in university. I have a degree in radio, TV, and film from the University of Texas at Austin. That's me there on the right-hand side with some strange stuff on my head that I don't currently have. But then I got recruited by CNN, and so I went to CNN and worked bottom rung, and then worked my way up there to an executive producer in about 10 years there. And then the New York Times started doing documentaries with the Discovery Channel, so I went there and worked with the newspaper to do that. And then when video started to be streamable on the web, I was one of the original video journalists at the New York Times. And that led, of course, to another job down the road where I was the head of multimedia at Time Magazine. And along the way, I was using what I had learned and applying it to teach others. I spent a year in Cairo as a night fellow there, teaching at the American University in Cairo. Went to Princeton for a semester and taught there before I went to Time. And then when I was in New York, I taught at the Columbia's International Affairs School before coming to Northwestern. And in each of these places, I have taken the experience that I have and tried to help students sort of rise to the level of being professional quality journalists. And that's true also for the rest of my colleagues in the school. We have several professors who are research professors doing extraordinary work, but most of us actually come from industry. So we have folks from ESPN, from sports. We have folks who've worked in local stations. My associate dean there, Beth Bennett, worked in local TV for a long time. Brent Huffman is a documentary filmmaker. Ava Greenwell worked in television news for a long time. Missy Isaacson was at ESPN. Alex Kotlowitz is an amazing narrative writer. CeCe Rogers worked at CNN for a long time. Louise Kiernan is a Pulitzer Prize winner. So we have these really extraordinary people who are great professionals who are the faculty here working with the students. And look, there's more. So we take that experience, and a lot of us continue to work. I find it's important not just to, although I teach full-time, I'm a full-time professor there now, I continue to do my own work as well. So I've done pieces for AJ Plus on the digital side. I worked with the New York Times documenting every shooting over the weekend, over a Memorial Day weekend in Chicago a couple of years back. Did a whole series for MSNBC on gun violence in the city and other things like that. So I continue to work, and I feel it's important to stay engaged in industry so that I can remain current in what I do. So I do basically everything. I report, I shoot, I write, I edit, and do everything for these different news outlets. And taking that experience and then helping students to learn from my experience and then help them become better. We actually have an extraordinary impact our school does on the industry itself. There's 16,000 alumni that are still living out there. And they include folks like Susan Page, who's the works at USA Today in a top position there. Jim Risen at the New York Times, and Vanita Nair at CBS, and James Foley, of course, was a graduate of our program as well. Probably the most notable person in our program, of course, is this guy that you may recognize, George R.R. Martin. Anyone know who he is? Yeah? Any Game of Thrones fans out there? Well, he went to our school in the 1970s and the early 70s, and he has yet to finish those novels. So I'm really working. We need to get on him to finish the last book. But really, taking all these experiences, and I have a spreadsheet here, but I don't know if I'll have time to go through it. But basically, it looks at the students who are currently in the industry from 2012 to 2018, and just the number of places where former students are, alums are, and all the major networks, all the major newspapers, small outlets, and agencies and things like that. So we have quite an influence out there in the industry. Medill is considered one of the top journalism schools. We like to think it is the top journalism school, but we have some competition from some other schools as well. We offer a couple degrees, a BSJ, a Bachelor of Science in Journalism, and then also a Master's of Science in Journalism. The BSJ, of course, is a 4-year degree, an undergraduate degree at Northwestern University, which is actually a top institution and difficult to get into. You have to have high test scores and good grades in order to get in, and then you apply also to be within our school. So it's very competitive. And then we have the Master's in Journalism, which is a 1-year program in a full 12 months. And so students basically study nothing but journalism for 1 year in the MSJ, whereas the undergrads are taking courses in liberal arts and other things. I have some students who are like triple majors. Like one of them is an international affairs and music and journalism at the same time, and I don't know when she sleeps, but she manages to get all of her pieces into me on time too, which is pretty impressive. Excuse me. One of the other things about being on airplanes for 23 hours is that it's a little dehydrating, so excuse me. Like other universities, we have opportunities for students to get professional experience while they're in school. We have a school newspaper, we have a school radio station, we have some opportunities to do some basic TV kind of production, something called Northwestern News Network. We have magazines and things like that. But the key, while our other competitors have more robust, like TV stations and radio stations and newspapers, like in Missouri, for instance, they own the newspaper in the local town where the school is, and they basically have great opportunities for practical education. We instead, I think, really link better with industry, and then we create experiential learning opportunities for our students within industry, so that, and it's mostly done through something called a journalism residency. Every student in our BSJ program has to spend 1 full quarter. Now we're on the quarter system rather than semesters, so we have 3 11-week quarters. And they spend 1 full quarter working full-time at a news site. Okay? And the sites pay either an hourly wage or a stipend for the students to come there. And then they agree to work with our students and the advisors, like myself, to enrich the learning experience. And this is real-world experience. For instance, this is one of the Jesse Kirsch. This is what he did actually working as a local reporter for a station in Lansing.
Here for you live from the corner of Abbott and Grand River with the latest on what's going to be torn down behind me.
So this is actually him as a senior getting his undergraduate degree, and he went to a station and actually had opportunities to be a reporter, on-air reporter, and this is some of the work that he did during his JR. This is in East Lansing, Michigan. So it's really a pretty extraordinary chance, because they not only are they getting some work experience, they're also getting it in a way that the station agrees to work with us to help the person grow. It's not just an internship where they're getting coffee for somebody. They actually become part of the team. And Jesse now is working for a top station in Chicago, which is the 3rd largest media market in the country. and he works for the ABC station now. Straight out of school, he managed to get that job. So we have journalism residencies in lots of major newspapers and magazines and other digital sites. It used to be called Teaching Newspaper back in the day when the Medill School was primarily a newspaper-focused program. But now we have several national and local TV stations as well, CNBC, Dateline NBC, ESPN, and then local stations throughout the country. And the way that we work on this is the key to experiential learning for us is to be reflecting on what you're learning pretty much constantly, thinking about it and discussing it with your advisors and also your site supervisors. So we require students submit a weekly log, and has to contain substantive details about the assignments and the feedback that they're getting, so that they have a good record of what they're doing and are thinking about what they're learning every single week. The assignment gives you an academic reason, and also they have to do like basically report on the site that they're doing. They have to do a paper, and it gives them an academic reason to find out more about how the site works and to meet the leaders there. They have to talk to at least 3 people within the organization and write a 4 to 6 page double-spaced paper on the organization itself. So it forces them to kind of report on their own place where they're working, and it gives them a chance to really reflect on what they're doing there. And it gives them a chance to sort of demonstrate that they understand the big picture and get to know the sort of insights into the site's structure, philosophy, and purpose. So they're not just there working, they're actually thinking about the place itself and how it functions, and really digging into the workings of the place that they're working. And then they pay it forward. So after they have their experience of 11 weeks, they spend a little bit of time writing a memo to future students. Like, here's what I learned here, here's what I did here, here are the pitfalls, here is the place you don't want to live, here's the good people at the place, here's a good boss, people who are nurturing and all that. And then that sort of goes in these big binders. Now it's digital, but you have these big binders of things, and students can go through and read the feedback that other students have given in previous years. There's also a student evaluation of their own experience, and then the site supervisor evaluates the student. And then if I'm advising, I'll go to the site itself and spend some time there and make sure that things are going well. And the ultimate evaluation looks at what the student's overall performance, but also gives them some things about what their strengths are and what they can work on. So it actually helps the student think about how they might be better down the road after leaving the journalism residency and into the professional world. Another way that we really have sort of really robust experiential learning experiences is our emphasis on global travel. Our previous dean, Brad Ham, was very big on this, and it's sort of need blind. Students, he wanted every single student to be able to travel overseas at least once during the time that they're there, either as a bachelor's or a master's student, and that we found money to actually help students who couldn't afford to go otherwise. We found money for them so that they wouldn't have to worry about it, not affording it. And so I've taken students to Paris, where we looked at, and to Doha in Qatar, where we actually have a campus there. We have a school, Northwestern has a school there in Doha. So I had our students work along with students there and report together. In Paris, my colleague Peter Slevin and I took a group of undergraduate students for a week to look at refugee issues there in Paris and in Calais, as the sort of influx of Syrian and other refugees were coming into Europe during that time. And then on the master's side, we have something called Medill Explorers. So we take the middle of the winter quarter, the middle week, the 5th week, and every single student in our master's program goes and has an experience. And those can be any number of places. We have students who go to Johannesburg, South Africa, where we have some pretty robust programs, to Tokyo. The business students go there. The environmental and health students go to Bodega Bay, California. Some social justice students have gone to Puerto Rico. Some folks went to, actually some of our sports reporting students reported for U.S. News sites and newspapers at the Olympics themselves in South Korea last year. And we had groups going into Havana, and to the American Southwest, and Los Angeles. And that has allowed me, actually, I've been to Pakistan several times over the past several years because I helped develop a center for journalism training at IBA. And as part of that grant, I was able to bring students here. I brought 8 master's students 2 different times, and I paired them up with reporters here in Pakistan, where they were able to work side by side for a week and produce a piece for the Express Tribune and some other places. So we have academic goals and learning outcomes for these courses, and we're very careful to make sure that this isn't just a trip. It's not just a vacation. You know, this really is something really, no matter what the trip entails, there is a component in there. So we have the learning programs provide distinctive off-campus research, reporting, and networking possibilities in the U.S. and abroad. Through these unique faculty-led trips, students will gain critical insight, practical skills, and experiences that will help them thrive in the rapidly evolving field of journalism. And then we have the sort of learning goals here to report research and deepen their knowledge of a topic, broaden their journalistic view of the world through firsthand experience, learn to engage effectively and ethically with people in an unfamiliar community, culture, and/or setting, learn industry best practices with the faculty, and then produce work that connects the classroom learning with the experiential components in the learning programs. So that's really important to us as an educational institution, is to make sure that there are goals there about the learning outcomes, that we want to be very, very intentional about how we guide the students through this process so they come out learning a great deal in the end, and it's not just a trip to Pakistan or wherever. And our master's program also is very much experiential in that it really is learning by doing. And we have reporting classes in our Chicago newsroom, so students report in Chicago in specializations like social justice, sports, video and broadcast, which I lead, magazine, health, environment, and science. And we also have in Washington, students go and become reporters in Washington for different outlets. And we also have a politics and policy and foreign affairs strand. And in San Francisco, we have another office where we have entrepreneurial innovation and entrepreneurship strand in journalism, and also business and technology out there. So it's located right in Silicon Valley. Actually, it's right down downtown San Francisco, an amazing space. And then this past year, the university gave me a little bit of money, which is always nice. And what it allowed me to do was to go out and, for myself, just go out and visit a lot of newsrooms, and to keep our curriculum on a broader sense, not just the special trips that we do, but to keep our curriculum up to speed with industry. So I was able to spend some time at the BBC and at CNN, BuzzFeed, ESPN, our public broadcasting, both television and radio, and at some local stations in the New York Times and also an MTV show, just to sort of get a sense of how things are being done out there. And I sort of took kind of the sense of the origins of filmmaking. Actually, was a documentary project where they wanted to see if all the horses' hooves were all off the ground at the same time. So they lined up cameras to be able to sort of document that. And so I wanted to think about myself as sort of Edward Muybridge, like trying to go out there and solve a question. And thinking about the world's first animated GIF. But I wanted to go out and observe production and reporting workflows, the writing and the editorial processes at all these places, the post-production tools that are in use. And I asked everybody there what they wish they had learned in school before they started their first job, and then what they also wish people learned before they came to them now that they're hiring people. So what remains the same, what's different? You know, from my own experience, I worked in television, I worked in a newspaper that was doing video, I worked at a magazine that was doing multimedia, but what's changed, and I wanted to make sure that we're up to snuff. So I learned a lot, and I learned that newsroom management systems are all similar enough that if you teach what goes into them, students should be able to figure it out pretty quickly, because they're similar enough across the board. Project management in video editing especially is crucial, and we need to teach that from the very beginning. Strong writing is crucial in helping students develop a voice for their own narration style, can help them get ahead. And students need to know how to pitch stories, not just subjects. And news judgment is crucial. So these are actually the foundational things that we, I think, do really well at our school, and they're sort of the bedrock of what we do. And I was glad to see that that sort of is still regarded as important out there in the industry. Every student, no matter what the platform, if they're going to be in video, in magazines or newspapers or some digital platform, they need to know video. And we actually have really ingrained that into our curriculum so that students do learn video on a fundamental level, every single student. And that's going to help them as they go down the road. And we use some editing software called Adobe Premiere, which actually is a pretty good choice in that no matter what you end up working on in different newsrooms, we can teach that in a way that will be pretty seamless as you go into other types of editing systems like Final Cut Pro or Avid. If the way we teach Premiere can be sort of vanilla and can help students be able to jump right in. And then having some exposure to advanced tools like Adobe After Effects, some more advanced animation type things, will really help them get ahead, and so we wanted to find ways to allow students to do that. What folks that wish they'd learned would be project management, coping with deadlines, working in teams. What they wish new hires knew is to be better writers, more experience in teamwork, mastery of a specialized skill. And then one thing that I really have learned as a teacher for the last 6 years is really finding ways to teach students to teach themselves things. Because we only have a certain amount of time in the classroom. And if I'm teaching something like a sophisticated piece of software like After Effects, there's so much that you can do with that program. If I just teach the basics and then teach students how to find out how to learn what they need to do something that they want to try, and get that sort of sense of curiosity and excitement about it, then I think that's doing them a great service, and that they will teach themselves to learn other things. And then they teach each other that sort of thing. So that's something crucial. So really sort of sticking to our bedrock values and then allowing students to specialize in certain areas. Another thing I learned is that the ground is constantly shifting because digital is continues to disrupt the industry, and social media has really done even more of that. When you look just here, this is just in the States, the number of folks doing video as part of what they do, or as their core. Basically, everyone's doing it, and some are doing it better than others. I'm trying to get good quality video out there, because it actually is kind of hard to get the really good quality done cheaply and quickly. So last year, the last year and a half or so, a lot of folks have switched to video. They did this pivot to video, and it was sort of disastrous. And they laid off a bunch of their writers, and they decided to go with video without preparing their audience for that shift. And so it was kind of a disaster, and it's still a big reckoning. And Facebook had a lot to do with that because they tweak their algorithm, and everybody sort of freaks out, and they have to change the way they do things. But I think now people sort of realize that Facebook is not necessarily the friend of journalism, and that they've sort of tweaked things in a way that made certain organizations become their pieces never really rose to the top. But they've decided to start publishing their own stuff in something called Facebook Watch, and so they've got different organizations doing actual programming for them on Facebook, and they're paying them. In fact, they're paying CNN upwards of $10 million to have Anderson Cooper do a show just for on Facebook, and it's shot in a vertical format. So there's lots of challenges ahead, and video news is going to have to find a way to deal with this on-demand kind of world out there where we're used to watching Netflix and watching an entire series, and how does news fit into that? How do we make that work? And who's going to become sort of the news program for these kinds of things? And then how do we deal with the fact that now you can make someone say whatever you want them to say, because software now is making it very easy to do what they call deep fakes, where you can make Obama or someone say something that they didn't say, but it looks reasonable enough that people would believe it, or just the idea that you could do it can really be disruptive. And so that adds sort of fake news on steroids, because now people don't trust anything that they see. So anyway, basically thinking about the experience that we can offer to students and the kind of connections we can give to them and how those all kind of play in together is really what we're going for. And we've had great success in that in the history of our program, and we're continuing to do that going forward. So that's my info there. So. Thank you.